But after marriage, Mary discovered the truth hidden beneath the charm and glitter of Jay's world. The promise of stability she had imagined quickly crumbled. Mary soon realized she wasn't marrying into wealth, she was carrying the burden. At first, she thought her husband's trust fund would shield them, but it quickly became clear that it served only Jay's pleasures. His trust fund was reserved solely for his indulgences, lavish nights out, expensive gadgets, and selfish pleasures. Rent, groceries, utilities, even little emergencies, everything fell on her shoulders. Instead of relief, marriage brought heavier responsibilities, draining her energy and savings. She had walked into the union expecting partnership but found herself playing the role of provider. The glamorous life she imagined was a mirage. Behind the glittering family name lay a man unwilling to share the weight of building a real home. Jay was not the dependable husband she hoped for but a man-child cocooned in entitlement. The reality was harsh. Mary had married into wealth she could never touch. His parents refused to help, insisting he should have married a woman with inheritance, someone from their circle who understood the unspoken rules of wealth and privilege. To them, Mary was an outsider, successful, yes, but not the kind of bride they envisioned for their son. In hushed conversations, they lamented Jay's choice, calling it short-sighted. They believed that a union with another heiress would have guaranteed security for Jay, merging fortunes and keeping their legacy intact. To the Shotes, the trust fund was enough. Beyond that, they could not justify giving Jay more money, especially to sponsor what they considered Mary's extended family struggles. Their philosophy was simple: the rich should marry the rich, ensuring wealth stayed within the family. Anything else felt like a loss, a crack in the foundation they had built over generations. So, while they smiled in public and maintained appearances, privately they distanced themselves, believing Jay's marriage was his own responsibility to manage. In their world, marriage was not just about companionship, it was a financial strategy, and Jay, in their eyes, had failed to play it wisely. His two sisters, both married to wealthy men, openly snubbed Mary and treated her as beneath them. At family gatherings, they flaunted their designer outfits and extravagant vacations, making subtle jabs about her more modest lifestyle. They rarely included her in conversations, often exchanging knowing glances that made her feel like an outsider. To them, she was not an equal but a mistake, someone who had entered the family without the kind of wealth or pedigree they believed necessary. Their disdain was constant, wrapped in condescending smiles and dismissive remarks, reminding Mary she would never truly belong in their world. When Mary became pregnant, she asked Jay to step up as a husband and father, hoping the news would stir a sense of responsibility in him. She imagined he would finally put aside his carefree ways, recognizing the gravity of bringing a child into the world. With gentle words at first, she pleaded for him to contribute more, financially, emotionally, and practically. She reminded him that the baby would need stability, care, and sacrifice from both parents. But her requests felt like they were falling on deaf ears. His response was silence, malice, and childish tantrums at the slightest argument. Whenever Mary tried to discuss important matters, whether about finances, the baby, or household responsibilities, Jay would withdraw into long bouts of sulking. He refused to engage in meaningful conversations, giving her the cold shoulder until she apologized, even when she had done nothing wrong. At times, he exploded in immature outbursts, slamming doors, raising his voice, or storming out of the house just to make a point. Instead of behaving like a husband and soon-to-be father, he acted like a spoiled teenager denied his way. Mary found herself constantly walking on eggshells, afraid that the smallest disagreement could spiral into yet another dramatic episode. The emotional strain was heavier than the financial one. She realized she wasn't just carrying their child, but also the burden of managing an adult who refused to grow up. To Mary's dismay, his immaturity became even more glaring during this period. Instead of preparing for fatherhood, Jay acted as though nothing had changed. What she hoped would unite them only exposed how unready he truly was. Mary finally admitted to herself she had ignored the red flags during courtship. She remembered the subtle signs, the way Jay avoided paying for dates but would rather she does Netflix and chill, his excuses about losing jobs, and his dismissive attitude toward responsibility. At the time, she told herself every man had shortcomings and that it was excesses that come with the silver spoon. But now, faced with his selfishness and immaturity, she realized those warning signals had been clear all along. What she once romanticized as quirks were in fact patterns she should never have ignored. During their courtship, Mary had convinced herself that love was about patience and compromise. She had even amused herself, Jay was testing her loyalty, if she was in it for the money. She carried the relationship forward with hope, thinking her loyalty would inspire him to grow. But marriage brought no change. Instead, it magnified his weaknesses. Jay continued to live as though he were single, pouring his trust fund into personal indulgences, leaving Mary to juggle bills, household needs, not to forget her extended family untitled demands and eventually, the cost of preparing for their baby. The long work hours at her oil company drained her physically, while the constant demands of home drained her emotionally. She found herself coming home exhausted, only to discover Jay lounging in front of a screen, scrolling endlessly or gaming, indifferent to her struggles. Stress became her constant companion. She worried about rent, food, the baby's arrival, and her dwindling energy. At night, she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how she had allowed herself to fall into such a trap. Jay was not interested in growing up. He was comfortable being cared for, sheltered by his family's wealth and indifferent to what it meant to be a husband. The marriage left her overworked, and the more she gave, the more he expected, as though her sacrifices were simply her duty. The imbalance weighed on her heart until the love she once felt began to wither. Finally, the thought of divorce crept into her mind. At first, it frightened her. Divorce was not something she had ever imagined for herself. But the idea of raising a child in such an environment felt even worse. She began to see separation not as failure, but as survival. Divorce could mean a chance at peace, a break from the endless cycle of exhaustion and disappointment. At the very least, she told herself, she could secure child support, ensuring that Jay bore some responsibility for the life they had created together. It was not an easy decision, nor one she could announce overnight. But deep inside, Mary knew her heart was leaning toward freedom. Staying meant continuing to drown. Leaving, though uncertain, might give her and her child a chance to breathe. She would get an enormous amount in child support that could ease her burden, more than what she earned slaving away for a man-child in what had become a non-existent marriage. The thought was a small flicker of hope in Mary's heart. After all, the law required fathers to contribute to their children's welfare, and Jay's trust fund, though not endless, was enough to guarantee a comfortable sum for her child's upbringing. In her mind, child support meant security, a chance to raise her baby without being drained by Jay's selfishness and emotional neglect. For once, she imagined a future where her work earnings went into building her own stability, not covering the carelessness of a husband who refused to grow up. But reality came crashing down when her in-laws stepped in. The Shotes, powerful and calculating, saw her whispers of divorce as a threat to their legacy. They issued veiled threats, reminding her of their influence in business, politics, and even the courts. With their connections, they claimed, custody battles would not favor her. Instead, they could strip her of everything, take her child under the guise of protecting the family name, and leave her broken. It was not just intimidation, it was a deliberate warning that their wealth could silence her and bend justice. Mary felt trapped. The very family she thought she had married into now stood against her, ready to use their status as a weapon. If she stayed, she would suffer endlessly, continuing to shoulder the weight of bills, loneliness, and emotional abuse. She would remain in a marriage that drained her spirit, watching her dreams and health fade away. Yet, if she left, she faced the terrifying risk of losing her child, the one innocent life she desperately wanted to protect. Her heart ached with the cruel dilemma, love her baby enough to endure the pain, or risk it all to fight for freedom. Each night, Mary wrestled with the decision. She imagined scenarios, standing before a judge, trying to prove she was the better parent, or enduring another year of Jay's tantrums just to keep her baby in her arms. She weighed her options again and again, but every path seemed littered with thorns. Divorce promised child support but also risked the devastating loss of custody. Staying promised her child's presence but at the cost of her sanity and dignity. For the first time in her life, Mary realized wealth was not always a blessing, it was a weapon. The Shote's money, which could have uplifted and supported her marriage, was instead positioned against her as leverage. Her voice felt small in the echo of their influence, but her will remained quietly strong. She wondered if other women had been caught in the same web, married into wealth only to realize too late that the gold was a cage. So, the question lingers, heavy and unresolved: should Mary remain in this marriage, swallowing her pain for the sake of her child, or should she summon the courage to fight back, knowing the risks could cost her everything? What do you think? Should Mary endure a loveless marriage to keep her child close, or should she break free, challenging the power of her in-laws no matter the consequences? Drop your thoughts in the comments.